Good morning, everybody. It's me, Strimtom, and today I'm bringing you the first episode of the new and improved Beginner Basics for Dungeons & Dragons Online. If you are watching this video and it's still up, that means the information in this video is still relevant. So even if this might be 3 or 4 years old, the information in this video is still relevant, and any corrections or adjustments or updates that need to be made will be found in a pinned comment down below. Now, the whole point of this series is that I want to get people started with Dungeons & Dragons Online and make it easier for them to kind of pick something and get going. Because if you look at the classes, there's a lot of different character classes, and then there's also like a bunch of different races, and then you have to like pick your stats and learn all these things, and it can be really overwhelming at the start. So the goal of this series is to help you get started so you can start playing and start learning, and then kind of branch out from there, or maybe find some other good resources that you want to look at. So the focus of today is looking at all the different character classes to help you pick what you should get started with and what you should play at the beginning. Before you might ask, some people might want to know, oh, what's the best class in the game? Well, all the classes are really good. DDO has done a really good job of balancing out the different character classes to make them all powerful and useful in their own way, so they can be used in a lot of places. And on top of that, DDO is unfortunately very complicated, so you can actually multi-class all of the characters. So even a character class that maybe isn't as good on its own, being like pure, like going all the way 20 levels of one class, well, I could do a little bit of this and a little bit of that and a little bit of this, and then all of a sudden I get some amalgamation that just ends up being better than everything else. So today we're going to focus on the single classes. All of them are good. I'm going to give you a quick rundown of each one. And then also bear in mind with this video, this is part of a playlist. So you will be able to watch a video about each individual class outside of this once you have a bit of an understanding, as well as other videos that give you some general information about the game. Each class video is going to come with a character build that you can use to follow as your first time playing through the game. It will give you step by step what you need to do, so that way you can be as successful as possible and just kind of learn the game as you go. And each of the individual videos will explain to you all the mechanics that character class is going to use. Although there will be some extra kind of general videos that, if you're getting started, might also help you on your journey. But enough gabbing from me. Let's talk character classes, and what better place to start than melee classes. Now, I want to make sure this is important. When you look at these distinctions, melee, spell, and specialist, all of the different characters can kind of do all the things. Any character can be a melee. Not any character can be a spellcaster. The ones that have spells can be spellcasters, but things aren't just in one category, but this is a good way to get started. So, Fighter. What is Fighter? The Fighter is a character class that pretty much focuses on weapons and armor to deal lots of damage or reduce lots of damage. It's very straightforward. I wouldn't really call it boring. It focuses more on the individual combat moments, and it actually gets a lot of different combat moves that it can use, ways to inhibit foes, different combat maneuvers like being able to trip people, break people's armor, stuff like that. And overall, it is very, very powerful. Really good DPS character, really good tank character. The one thing that Fighter lacks is the ability to heal itself consistently, although they do have the effect Second Wind, where you can kind of take a deep breath and get some health back. But you have a limited number of times you can use that, so fighters definitely do pair well with other people who can heal, or make yourself so tanky you don't take damage anyway. Fighters also have a second type of fighter called a Dragon Lord. This is a premium archetype, as some classes have archetypes which are like the same class, but kind of with a few things different. And the main thing with Dragon Lord is they lose a lot of their defense, so they don't nearly have the same tankiness as the regular fighter, but what they give up in defense, they gain, not in offense, but in different types of special moves and abilities. You get to focus on draconic power, allowing yourself to do a dragon roar, which can stun and disorient your foes, getting additional damage on your attacks, and kind of conjuring the power of dragons to deal additional damage in different types of ways, different elements and different types. So whereas the fighter kind of hits you with steel, the Dragon Lord hits you with some steel and maybe some fire on the side or some lightning. Very powerful, very, very useful, and used all over the place, especially in the endgame. Moving on to Barbarian. Barbarian is pretty straightforward. Put on a two-handed weapon, attack people really hard, and forget how to read, because you don't need any of that with the Barbarian. It's all about attack, 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 slam with a big two-handed weapon. You rage, which gives you yourself some stats, and there's different ways to bump up your rages. Barbarians are really, really tanky naturally. They can just shrug off huge amounts of damage. They also get the ability to just heal passively as they engage in combat, so the more you fight, the more powerful you can become. And on top of that, they have some pretty cool moves of their own. One of them is a cracking attack that allows them to just like split their enemy's armor, but then it also makes the Barbarian more powerful, like they're leeching the power from their enemies. Or they get an ability called Visage of Terror, which is where they literally look so terrifying that the people around them have a heart attack and instantly die. Very cool, very powerful ability, and the Barbarian is a lot of fun if you like running around and bashing things with a two-hander. Moving on, we have Paladin. Paladin is kind of like the fighter, where you can kind of specialize in having like sword and board and go kind of more tanky. You can also be a vanguard, where you can have like a sword and shield but actually attack people with the shield, which is kind of cool. Two-handed weapons, dual wielding. The main difference is that Paladins focus where they pick a deity, and that deity determines what type of weapons that they can use. Now Paladins can expand this a little bit, but if you decide to focus on one deity that focuses with quarterstaffs, then quarterstaff might be your main weapon for a little while until you can get some more different weapons that your deity will be okay with you using. But when you use those favored weapons, you become very powerful damage dealer, as well as having the ability to channel holy energy to heavily damage your foes, especially if they're evil. Destroying evil is what Paladin does, and there's a lot of evil to be destroyed in this video game. Paladins also get a little bit of magic, which they can use defensively, and a little bit of healing, so they're very good at sustaining themselves and also catching foes, especially by, a friend is dying. You can just go tap your shoulder and say, hey, you're alive, and lay on hands and keep them alive. However, if you like that healing element a lot, we move on to Sacred Fist. The Sacred Fist is kind of a monk/paladin hybrid, where the idea is that you give up on all your armor and your weapons. You actually are a hand-to-hand fighter instead, but they gain a lot of mystical power, allowing them to really heavily focus on their healing ability, whereas paladins can't be healers. They can kind of do some healing, but they're not healers. A Sacred Fist absolutely can be a healer. It can channel full holy energy, do lots of healing on the side, but on top of that, it also is a fist fighter, and it can channel its energy in different ways. You definitely lose some damage and some tankiness moving to a Sacred Fist, but what you gain instead is kind of more of a party and support role if you're more interested in that. And then we move on to Monk, the last of the melees. Now, monks, your classical martial artists, they attack with their fists hand-to-hand combat. They also attack with quarterstaffs as well, and you can even focus on some more of the bladed weapons if you like, grabbing a kama or a short sword and doing some kind of ninjutsu stuff going on. On top of that, they also get the ability to throw shurikens with very, very high precision, doing a lot of damage. Monks actually are the only character class that can actually use shurikens well, whereas all the other classes don't get nearly the same bonuses, so they're quite good at that. You get a lot of different martial arts moves, and their main mechanic is Ki. It's a resource that only monks and the Sacred Fist get access to, which is when you attack enemies, your Ki bar fills up, and then you can spend your Ki to do different types of special moves and special abilities, whether that is punching a guy in the head and stunning them, or throwing down a flashbang to disorient your foes, or generating some magic and having a wave of fire come out from your body. A lot of cool options with Monk. Very, very cool class. They even get a little bit of healing as well, both for themselves and their allies. They make good in a party and good for solo as well. Then we have the Dragon Disciple. Dragon Disciple basically focuses, just like the Monk, on the melee and some of the other stuff, but its big thing is it actually becomes a spellcaster, getting the ability to cast spells that kind of take the form of the different elements you would imagine that a dragon would have. Like a black dragon focuses on acid, and so you can be a black dragon disciple and have a bunch of acid spells and acid abilities. Very, very cool. Giving yourself like Dragon Breath style moves. I'm a huge fan. It is the most recent thing added to the game as of the recording this video. And Dragon Disciple is powerful, it's fun, and it's honestly the most fun thing I've played in quite a while. So really, really fun. If you want to play Monk, but you want like a more spell-oriented Monk, Dragon Disciple is for you, although it is premium. Moving on, we have the Spellcasters. Now, it's important to note that just because it says Spellcasters, pretty much every single thing in the Spellcaster can also play as like a melee or alternate character. Remember, Dungeons & Dragons Online lets you multi-class, and it also doesn't restrict you on what you want to use. You just have to make sure you can fit it into your character. So all these things can do a lot. And we're actually going to start with Wizard. Wizard is your archetypal spellcaster. You start with a spell book. You can pick up scrolls and add more scrolls to your, or add the spells to your spell book and kind of enhance your spell book to learn all of the wizard spells. And then at any rest point, you can change out your spells whenever you cast them. The way that spellcasters work is that they have spell points, So you have this like blue mana bar, and as you cast spells, your spell points go down. Your spell points do not go up. You do not get them back unless you rest. So spellcasters, immediately you have to start thinking about how you need to conserve your points before you get to the next resting spot. So if you're somebody that really likes to plan out their dungeons and their adventures, you will like spellcasters a lot more, and especially wizard, because wizards, you plan out your adventure by choosing what spells you want to bring into the quest, and then you have to plan how you use your spells, because you need to make sure you can get to a shrine and you can able to rest and heal yourself and get all your spell points back, as they don't regenerate. However, wizards are very cool. You can turn yourself into an undead and kind of use this unholy necromantic magic, or alternatively, you can become an archmage and just become a master of all magic. Now, if you are somebody who doesn't really like thinking or planning, but you just want to blast things, that's where Sorcerer comes in. Sorcerer is just like the wizard in that they get the same spell list, but the difference is sorcerers get double the spell points, they cast twice as fast, and their cooldowns are half as long. So they're like wizard, except they just get to cast twice as many spells, which is pretty fantastic. The big drawback is that unlike the wizard, who they can learn all the spells, sorcerers are very limited on their spell pool. So a wizard might have 20 different spells to deal with a situation, the sorcerer might just have Fireball. And Fireball is usually pretty good. Sorcerers also specialize in a specific element, where you pick one element, whether it's fire or cold or acid, and as you focus in on that one element, eventually you actually get to turn into that element, becoming an elemental of that type, changing your entire character visual on top of that, and allowing you to ignore all resistances and immunities, which means as a wizard, if there is a fire creature, you have to swap to your cold spell, but if you're a sorcerer and you're a fire elemental, you just go, hey, my fire burns hotter, and burn that fire elemental up, and you don't even care. Very, very cool, very versatile. Both sorcerers and wizards can also be an Eldritch Knight, which is basically like a melee magic user, which is very, very powerful. Both of them are good. They're just different depending on what you want to play. Usually a wizard will end up being kind of like a undead, like knight, like a death knight sort of thing, whereas the sorcerer just ends up being kind of like a melee arcane cannon doing a lot of different damage. Then we have the Wild Mage. Wild Mages are like sorcerers, except the difference is they have wild magic. If you're familiar with wild magic from pen and paper, it's basically whenever you cast a spell, not every time you cast a spell, but sometimes when you cast spells, you can have extra things happen to you. Sometimes those things are very good, like giving you a defensive buff, or sometimes they're very bad, like causing you to become silenced because you cast a spell and now, oops, your lips are sealed shut and you can't cast any more spells for a few seconds, which can be quite bad. They can also be extremely good in the situation where sometimes you have a burst of energy that comes out of your body. It instantly kills all nearby enemies. It heals all your allies. And if any of your allies that are nearby are dead, it also resurrects them. Crazy stuff. Or you have a Stormclad that appears above your head and then it shoots a lightning bolt that kills you. So, you know, if you like spice, you like variants, Wild Mage might be for you. They also have a bunch of cool chaos spells, which is pretty fun. Next, that brings us to Cleric and Favored Soul. Cleric is your archetypal healer. They have healing spells for free, so always clerics are able to heal at all times as long as they have the spell points for it. But you can play them in a few different ways, being able to either kind of focus more in on the healing and do a lot more of that, or you can focus on being more of a holy spellcaster, either by getting all sorts of powerful light and good spells, or alternatively, because clerics get to pick a domain, which is basically like a focus of magic, you can actually get different types of elements. You can become like a fire cleric who follows the fire domain and gets a bunch of fire spells, or a water cleric who gets a bunch of cold spells to enhance their kit. Or if you want, you can be like a war priest, where instead of picking up one of these magical domains, you pick up the domain of destruction, which allows you to destroy enemies' armor. Or maybe you pick up the domain of war, which allows you to use every weapon in the entire game. Clerics have a lot of flexibility, whether they want to be a melee character, or a spellcaster doing damage, or a healer, or maybe a little bit of all of them at the same time. The reason why I bring up Favored Soul here is Favored Soul is to the cleric as the sorcerer is to the wizard. They get way more spell points, although they don't get double cast time and half the cast time and half the cooldown, because as a healer that would be kind of overpowered. So Favored Souls do have the same spells as cleric, but the difference is they don't get healing for free. They actually have to choose to pick healing spells, which is kind of one of the sacrifices, and they're much more limited. Clerics get all of the spells. Favored Souls only get a very small chunk that they can choose. Well, they get to choose from the same ones, but they can only have a very small list of those spells. spells. However, favorite souls are much more focused on those different directions, whereas clerics have kind of broad, more general usage. A favorite soul has really insane healing, or really insane spell damage casting, or really insane melee kind of combinations. One of the things that makes favorite soul kind of cool, and is the first thing on this list that kind of gets to do that, is favorite soul is a spellcaster. All the spellcasters use spellcasting stats, so you can see the different stats up here. Generally, if you're a spellcaster, you're going to use the intelligence, wisdom, or charisma stat for your spellcasting, and attacking usually uses strength and dexterity. But favorite soul gets to skip the line. They get an ability which lets them use their spellcasting ability as their attacking ability too, letting you do some cool melee spellcaster hybrid stuff with favorite soul you can't do on some of the other character classes, which is pretty neat. I'm personally a big fan of favorite soul, but it is also a premium character class that is unlocked by earning favor in the game, which is just earning reputation. So if you get started with DDO and you play around, you might earn the favored soul soon enough. And then that brings us to the Druid. Druid is kind of another sort of hybrid character. It's mostly a spellcaster, which is the way I think a lot of people will play it, where you cast big spells and deal big damage to your enemies, all focusing on the different elements of nature, like calling down a lightning bolt from a cloud in the sky, or producing a flame out of your hands to burn enemies, or causing literally an earthquake to happen that knocks people over and starts damaging enemies where they stand. Very, very cool character and gets a lot of access to good spell casting and some reasonable healing. Their heals are mostly heal over time as you kind of regrow the body as opposed to just healing it right away. So they have some cool utility there. However, Druids also get shapeshifting, allowing you to shapeshift into a wolf, being a competent melee build, allowing you to dash in and out of combat, kind of sneak attack people, take advantage of different people's weaknesses when they're not paying attention, or also have competent ways to disable foes, like being able to knock them over by biting at their legs, or even turning into a winter wolf, getting access to cold breath attacks, being able to freeze people solid. So very cool stuff there. They can also shapeshift into a bear. Bears can be very tanky, and so you can build a druid tank effectively, but they can also just do a ton of damage. If you're familiar with how grizzly bears are, they can rip trees down with their bare claws, and in this game they're no exception. Bears automatically get to hit all enemies in front of them, so as you're attacking, you're just swiping through huge clouds of enemies. They even get a tremor move where they slam on the ground, causing like a miniature earthquake. Very, very cool stuff. But if you want to shapeshift, but you want to be a spellcaster, don't worry, you still can, as the druid can either turn into a fire or a water elemental to enhance their spell casting, either to focus more on the fire spells or more on the cold and wintry spells. So you got a lot of options there when it comes to your character. Druid, very powerful, very good, and definitely something you might want to play. However, there's a second type of druid. Druids are all about the cycle of life and death. Well, if druids focus mostly on the cycle of life, somebody's got to focus on the death, and that is the Blightcaster. Blightcasters don't get an animal companion, unlike druids, which do. So you can see the little wolf down here. Blightcasters don't get an animal companion. Instead, they have the ability to shapeshift themselves into a blight wolf. They don't get a bear form either. They can turn into a blighted wolf, as opposed to the regular druid, which gets a winter wolf. The blighted wolf is all about decay, death, poison, and that sort of thing. They can also give themselves forms where they either turn into a hive or a swarm of bees, or they turn into a thorn knight, basically becoming like a dead, decayed tree type thing. They are very powerful spellcasters, being one of the best characters to level in the entire game. And on top of that, the melee portion is also quite fun, being able to be this like wolf of decay that gets a bite where, you know how I said the winter wolf, you can like, freeze a guy? Well, the Blightcaster, their blight wolf, they bite someone and they just die. So it's die versus freeze. It's hard to say which one's more fun. But overall, Blightcaster is very good, a lot of good utility, and quite enjoyable. It does give up on some of the healing, obviously, because it focuses on the death, but it gains some cool necromancy spells as well, so you might find Blightcaster to be pretty fun. And then we have Warlock. Warlock is like the intro beginner spellcaster. Warlocks do have spells, but very few of them, and their spell bar is actually quite small. Like their spell point bar is actually very small compared to the rest of the classes. However, Warlocks get the ability to Eldritch Blast, where you just click the mouse and they shoot magical energy out of their hands. The shooting of magical energy is extremely good. It's powerful, it does a lot of magic damage, and magic tends to avoid a lot of the damage reductions that melee characters generally have to deal with. Like, oh, you're fighting some type of special demon and you need or like a werewolf, and you gotta have silver to beat the werewolf. Well, the Warlock just goes, yeah, I have fire, and blasts. They're blasts count as spells, but they don't cost anything, so you can just keep blasting as much as you want. And you get to decide which pact you want to swear to become a warlock, as warlocks have lots of different pacts they can swear to. Do you want to swear a pact to a great fey creature, giving yourself access to a sonic eldritch blast and some fey spells? Or maybe you swear a pact to a celestial, gaining access to the ability to channel lightning through your hands and get a lot of positive and protective spells that you can cast on your allies. Or do you want to sign a pact to an ancient one that is beyond space and time, and get access to kind of Lovecraftian magics as a result? That's your option. Warlock is very fun, very versatile, and if it's your first time playing a caster, it gives you the opportunity to try spell casting without the worry of running out of mana, so you can kind of figure it out as you go and learn. And then you have the Acolyte of the Skin. Acolyte of the Skin is a special kind of fiend warlock, which, unlike the other warlocks where you you sign a pact and then you get some powers in exchange for your soul or whatever, the Acolyte of the Skin instead is all about, you don't just sign the pact. You're like, you know what? What if I wanted to be the demon? And the whole point of Acolyte of the Skin is you actually sign a fiend pact and then become a fiend as you play, as your character slowly turns into one. Very, very cool. You get to shoot out fire and things. And if that's your cup of tea, that's more of your kind of thought of you know what? I don't want to sign a pact to get power. I actually want to be the power. Acolyte of the Skin might be for you. Then we move on to the Specialists. This is basically something that doesn't directly fit in the other categories, so we're going to talk about them here. First, we have the Ranger. If you think Legolas is cool, this is where you go. Rangers are the easiest bow users in the game, getting all of the bow feats, so they get all the different bow abilities that other characters would normally have to take. Rangers just get them. And on top of that, Rangers get dual wielding for free as well, regardless of what your stats are. So a lot of different feats will have stat requirements. If you want to dual wield or use bows, you need to have dexterity, and it's pretty good. But what if you wanted to play like a dwarf that dual wields axes, and you don't want to have dexterity for that because axes are big and heavy, and my dwarf is big and strong and meaty? Well, you can just play a ranger without any dexterity, and they get all their dual wielding for free, and you can have lots of strength and constitution and be like a battle rager. Ragers are really interesting, and they give you a lot of flexibility. Generally, the way they play is either focusing on the bow, being a bowmaster, shooting lots of spells as an arcane archer, or by going into the Tempest tree, doing lots of cool dual wielding sort of nonsense, and becoming literally a whirlwind of damage. The Dark Hunter, by comparison, is a little bit different. It gives up on some of the bow skills, so you can no longer be an arcane archer. You can't cast magic to imbue your bow shots. Instead, they get access to kind of like a trapping type character. You get a pet, which you can see here, and you get access to this whole tree based around traps and the ability to set traps and deal with traps, which can be nice. Traps is something we haven't talked about yet, but in Dungeons & Dragons Online, there are traps everywhere. On the lower difficulties, you get hit by a trap and it hurts, and you kind of learn where it is. So then that way, when you go through on the higher difficulties, you can learn to avoid it or deal with it. However, on the higher difficulties, if you don't know where to go, and let's say you stumble into a trap or you go somewhere you didn't go in the quest before, and all of a sudden, boom, you get hit by a trap, usually that's just death. You're just dead. You got hit by a dangerous trap and you're gone. But Dark Hunters, not only can they disable and deal with traps, one of the few classes in the game that can, but also they have an ability which makes them just take less damage from traps all the time. So let's say you don't even see it and you accidentally stumble into one, you're actually probably going to be fine as the trap hits you and you go, ooh, 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 and you have time to move out of the way so that way it doesn't actually destroy you, and then you can disable it from there. Speaking of people who disable traps, let's talk about Rogue. Rogues were the original trap class. They were the original class in DDO that had the ability to disable traps. No other classes could do that. But now Ranger Dark Hunters can, Rogues can, and so can Artificers. So we have 3 different trap disabling characters, allowing you to get in and get rid of traps for your allies. The Rogues come in 3 different kinds. You've got the Thief Acrobat, who kind of bounce around on a quarterstaff, kind of bashing foes and breaking shins with a quarterstaff. Very useful. They got a lot of good utility, and they also have a lot of good area of effect as you can sweep through guys with your quarterstaff, which is pretty cool. Alternatively, you can be an assassin, sneaking around and then just getting one good stab and killing somebody with their assassinate ability. So that's always pretty fun, especially if you like knives. And then they have the Mechanic. The mechanic is the kind of the character class or character variant that focuses more on the traps and trap disabling, but also is on crossbows, mechanical weaponry. So they get the ability to use all the different types of crossbows, and they get a whole bunch of bonuses while using said types of crossbows. Faster loading, ability to do extra sneak attacks with them, targeting weak points. So a lot of really cool stuff you can do with Rogue, and with that crossbow mastery. If you like sneaking or you like having a character with some versatility, Rogue can be pretty fun for that. And since I was on the trail of traps, let's talk about Artificers. Artificers are a Eberron classic. They are basically, if you're not familiar with Eberron, which is where the game is based in, there is a lot of like sort of magical technology, and Artificers are the ones who conjure that. So they do have the ability to, instead of building, getting a pet like the Dark Hunter or the Druid, they build one. They get a little robot dog that they can fight with. They also get the ability to use all sorts of mechanical weapons like crossbows, much like the Rogue, except they can imbue their crossbows with special enchantments because they have magic. So they can maybe load in some bolts that deal extra acid damage and melt their foes, or bolts that destroy constructs because they're good at dealing with constructs. Additionally, Artificers can focus on the magical side of things, as they do have magic within them, so they can kind of turn some of the magic, instead of turning it into enchantment type magic, like enchanting their crossbows or enchanting their allies. What if they just figured out how to conjure fire and lightning on its own? So there is a spellcaster variant there as well. And then there's also a repair-oriented thing. Something I haven't talked about yet is that one of the races is called the Warforged, and they are literally robots, and they don't really get healed that well from regular magic. But Artificers can heal the Warforged really easily with their repair spells, and on top of that, as an Artificer, you can turn yourself into a robot, no matter what race you are. You can just start replacing some bones with some metal, and then you can become a machine, allowing you to heal yourself very, very easily with repair spells. You also might notice that there's this thing on their arm. There's a rune arm. There's a Artificer exclusive ability that allows them to put on an arm cannon that you can charge up to fire and pretend like you're Mega Man. And you can even do it with a crossbow, where you've got crossbow in one hand, arm cannon in the other, blasting people at the same time. Artificers are very, very cool, very versatile, and the goggles go on and off when I zoom in. I didn't even know that. And then lastly, we have the Alchemist. Alchemist shouldn't be in Specialist. It is 100% just a spellcaster, but it is here for now. Alchemists are kind of like Artificers, but without the technology. So they're all about just mixing stuff together, making potions, and throwing them. So if you like the idea of throwing a potion, like have you ever thought in pen and paper D&D, man, it'd be so easy if I could just whip a potion at a guy to heal them? Or maybe you played Final Fantasy Tactics and you were throwing items all the time on your alchemists or on your chemists, and you're like, why haven't other games done this? Guess what? You can. With this one, the Alchemist, if you want to heal somebody, you whip a bottle of Cure Wounds at them and it hits them and they get healed. You want to hurt somebody, you whip a bottle of fire at them and it explodes right in their face. All about throwing bottles and doing all sorts of stuff. They have good crowd control, they have good damage, they have pretty good healing. The one limitation is because there's the throw element of Alchemist when it comes to healing, they have really high throughput spells. I'm talking the highest healing in the whole game. No class beats them. But there's a travel time, so when you decide to throw a potion, you got to throw the potion. It's got to travel across the room, and if somebody jumps in the way, it might hit that person instead. Whereas other classes, they can just target somebody, cast a heal spell, and they get their heals. So Alchemist, the highest throughput, but something that needs some practice. You got to be good if you want to be healing on an Alchemist, or if you don't care that much about healing on an Alchemist, you'd rather just throw explosive bombs at people all day. Well, you can just heal yourself really easily because I'm right here, and you can just swing your potion right away. Alchemists can also focus on being a poisoner and pull out a weapon, either a throwing weapon like throwing daggers or a regular dagger, and you can kind of become like a poison enchanted melee character, kind of focusing on poisoning people, even to the point where you can poison things normally that can't be poisoned, like constructs and other machines, by basically rusting them instead of poisoning them, which is kind of cool. Alchemists have a unique mechanic where they, whenever they cast their spells, they're all coated with different types of like ingredients, and by casting spells at different types, you create a elemental reaction, and then that gives them bonus power and stats. It sounds very complicated, but it's actually just color-coded spells. So if I cast a red spell and a yellow spell, I get into the orange reaction state because you combine the colors, and it starts to get a little bit easier from there, but it has that extra element. I would say Alchemist is an advanced character class, where it is a little bit harder of a spellcaster than some of the other ones, but also it is insanely good. So it is pretty worth it to learn. Now, Bard is an interesting class because while in Dungeons and Dragons generally Bard is seen as more of the jack of all trades but master of none, in this game you can actually master quite a few trades. Specifically, Bards are able to become powerful spellcasters, not only dealing sonic damage with spells, but also having incredible crowd control abilities and having the effect that they can increase the power of spells that both they cast and their allies cast. They also get the ability to increase the power of the attacks that their allies use, as well as themselves, becoming a powerful melee user in their own right. And they can even become more of like a dashing scoundrel type character, entering a swashbuckling stance that give them powerful bonuses as long as they're in kind of like a dueling type stance. Very similar if you want to live out that Puss in Boots sort of play style. However, you can also become a Stormsinger, which is one of the Bard archetypes, where you give up on all of the melee swashbuckling style that the Bard can get, and instead you get an entire tree focused heavily on casting lots of lightning and ice spells, which can be very powerful when combined with your existing spell boosting abilities, making Bard Stormsingers very, very competitive at the endgame and really fun to level with all the same. Now, every single character class, well, not all of them, but a lot of them will have paths. These are the pre-built paths that the game gives you. I don't recommend you use these. They're very out of date as of the time of recording of this video. And so if anything I've said to you sounds interesting, I will be including a link below to a several list of character builds, as well as the playlist here that will contain videos for all sorts of different characters. So you will be able to find a build for each different character class and play around with it right away, as opposed to picking something like Tempest, where maybe the feats aren't so good and maybe some of the things you use aren't so good. Now, last but not least, you have the option to change your race. So depending on what type of race you want to play as, they all have different starting stats and they can be relevant. Unlike in modern 5th edition, where you can kind of just pick the character stats, this is based off of Dungeons & Dragons 3.5. And so there are different character stats for each of the individual races. So for example, Wood Elves have a higher dexterity and a lower intelligence, whereas a Dwarf has a higher constitution and a lower charisma. So these things can affect your character. On top of that, they might get like secondary abilities, like the fact that dwarves, if you are playing as a dwarf, you can get dwarven axes as a special weapon automatically without having to take a feat for it and have to learn it. Whereas alternatively, gnomes are masters of illusion and they get bonuses with different types of illusion spells. Or Aasimar, who are kind of like lesser angels of sorts, they get like a cure spell that they can cast by default. Or the newest Dampier, where you literally bite a guy and drain their fluids out of their body and heal yourself. So you get a lot of flexibility with different characters. You have a whole bunch of different options. No races are bad, but some of them just might be better than others depending on your build. So if you're somebody who says, you know what, I only like playing halflings, I'm only playing halflings, I will not play anything else and you can't make me, then go ahead, play halfling and have a blast. And it won't hurt you. It won't really hurt you that much in the long run, but there are some crazy customization and options that you can do. And the builds that I'm going to include will be picking specific races. So if you see one of the builds and you go, oh, the Barbarian looks cool, but I kind of want to try it as an Eladrin, or I kind of want to try it as a Dragonborn, you can. You just might have to make some adjustments depending on what's actually in there. And if the race is something that I think is mandatory for the build, one of the ones that I have posted, I will, of course, include that information in the build, so you will know what you can and can't change or tweak before you get into it. But that's it. So hopefully this has helped you decide what type of character you want to play, what you're interested in getting started with. I also realized that these spell and specialist sections were longer than the melee, and that's because melee is hit, which is less complicated than the spell and the spellcasters and these specialists. However, even with that being the case, that's not entirely true. There's a lot of nuance to melee combat and positioning and how to fight different types of monsters and how to deal with them. Whereas a spellcaster, a lot of it is the preparatory type of complication. As a melee, you're more worried about the complexities of combat directly with a monster, whereas as a spellcaster, you're more worried about the complexities of combat with your character sheet and inventory management, so you can be prepared for the adventure you're about to go on. But that is all I have for you for now. Please check out the rest of the playlist and see if there's anything else you might be interested in. I've got whole guides on different characters and everything in there, so I'm excited for people to get started playing some DDO. But that's all from me for now, so take care, enjoy yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.